Good afternoon. This presentation is entitled Helping the Homeless Find Hope and a Future, presented by Joseph's House of Camden. First, a quick introduction. We'll introduce the lesser of the important two first. My name is Eric Fischgrund. I'm a volunteer and committee member. I've supported Joseph's House for the past 4 years, along with my firm, Fish Tank PR, a public relations and marketing firm headquartered in New York City. My colleague is John Klein. And John, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, my name is John Klein. I serve as Development Director at Joseph's House, and I've had the good fortune of being one of the founding members of Joseph's House, along with a small group of others way back in 2010. I also now serve on the board of managers of Joseph's House. So we'll be, as Eric said, we'll be talking today about who we are, what we do, and hopefully ways that you might join us in our efforts.
And of course, you can find information at www.jhoc.org. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the need, some of the homelessness challenges that we're having in South Jersey, and of course, more specifically, the Camden area. As you can see from the data in front of you, most recent studies indicate that there are over 8,500 homeless people in New Jersey. This is from a 2018 report. While there have been many, while that's actually a decrease statewide, unfortunately, Camden and some surrounding areas was one of the few counties to see an increase in homeless population, which is obviously something that we're looking to combat now on a regular basis. And one thing we're going to talk a lot about throughout this presentation is what we consider to be one of the driving factors for this rise in homelessness down in the South Jersey and Camden area. And that's the really just the incredible need for a single point of entry and coordinated homeless services. So for those not familiar with that sort of terminology, I want to give you a little bit of background, and I want to use Philadelphia as sort of a contrasting point. Philadelphia has had centralized intake shelter for 20 years. What is centralized intake? It means that any time that you go, that if you're a homeless individual and you go to a homeless shelter, or if you speak with a member of social services community, you're out seeking help, you're going to go through a very similar process really across the board. A lot of the same paperwork, the information is really systemized in how it's received by the city, and how it's not just received, but also communicated throughout the various homeless shelters and social support groups. So what does this do? This provides consistency. So if an individual goes into a homeless shelter and completes one set of paperwork, they're not going to likely have to do it again 2 weeks later. Unfortunately, by contrast, the city of Camden doesn't have a centralized intake for shelter or coordination of services. So what does this mean? It means that if a homeless person goes to a shelter in Camden one day and then goes to a different shelter, only a little bit of distance away, they might have to go through some of the same hurdles twice. So they could be filling out very much different paperwork. They could be going through the same verbal exercises. It's really difficult to make progress because, unfortunately, as you would imagine, a lot of homeless individuals, they really struggle. It's not like you're homeless and then you're immediately off the street. It can be a bit of a process. And so for them, having to go somewhere and then have to be repetitively filling out the same paperwork, it can be really challenging, and it can be really disheartening, and it can be very frustrating. They could take a day off of, maybe they do have a job but don't have a home, and they take a day off of work, and then they find themselves doing something that they had done only weeks earlier elsewhere. So, as it says, like our partners in other NJ counties in Philadelphia, Joseph's House, and we'll talk more about ourselves later, we're really trying to adopt best practices that make this intake much more beneficial to the individual, and then obviously, of course, to the organizations, which really only benefits the community. The changing face of homelessness. So, maybe like some of you watching this now, I'm very familiar, of course, with homeless men and women, especially as someone who's lived in various cities, including New York and San Diego and Philadelphia throughout his life. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stigmas in American culture, and you picture a homeless individual as sleeping on a bench with this very long beard, and it's just not true. There's no typical face of homelessness. It's very often youth who've aged out of foster care. It is definitely men and women of all ages. Veterans, which is a well-documented issue in the United States, and other individuals with chronic medical conditions. Those could either be physical or mental. And then, of course, those who are struggling with addiction and mental illness. And then, one point that I think is really important to point out, one of my in my first year of working with Joseph's House, we were doing a summer event, and I was standing with a Camden police officer, and we were just talking about some of the people that come in, and he made a comment to me about how surprising it is how many of the people that he finds homeless or trying to procure drugs in the South Jersey area, they're suburban kids from middle and even upper class regions who they suffered sports injuries and were prescribed opiates and ended up addicted, and years later they're in their early and mid 20s and they're on the street. Also, again, homeless folks can also be people who are working and trying to save and just don't have the money yet to afford a place of their own. So we think it's really important for everybody to recognize that homelessness doesn't discriminate and that it can happen to anyone. So just told you a little bit about some of the people that we see on a day-to-day basis. And now I want to tell you a little bit about some of the challenges. One, living in different places every night, that's just not healthy for humans. I've given this example before, but when I and many others, perhaps even yourselves, travel for work, if you're on the road, especially if you're going to multiple cities, it can be a little bit hectic and you feel a little bit out of sorts and you don't eat as well and maybe you don't exercise as well and you miss your family. Imagine doing that on a day-to-day basis, not knowing where you're going to lay your head at night. It's very challenging. And it's one of the reasons this frustration can be very cyclical. And it's a reason that people can, fall back into old or bad habits and really have a struggle rising themselves out of homelessness. And then also, certainly, it's those coping with mental and physical health issues. I mentioned before that some of the individuals, such as veterans, that come back and have problems and are not able to get or hold a job. Maybe they can't stand on their feet for a long time. Maybe they've got some issues with respect to their mental health that make it very difficult for them to overcome homelessness. And then, of course, those that are struggling with addiction, we see that time and time again, whether it's drugs or alcohol, even when they begin to dig themselves out, it can be a very slippery slope and they can slide back in. A couple of items that aren't so obvious: loss of personal identification. This is something that never would have occurred to me prior to working with Joseph's House and volunteering at Joseph's House. But a lot of individuals just don't have social security numbers. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to open a bank account without a social security number. It can be very difficult to apply for a job and get through just the necessary paperwork on your application. While we're talking about job hunting, this seems simple, but not having a place to print a resume or work on a resume can be very challenging. And most homeless don't have access to computers and other basic resources that are really needed to find work and housing. And then just such a big one, and these last two bullets are so tied together, is the loss of a support system. I can only speak for myself, but my family, my loved ones, my friends, they're so important to my growth as an individual, whether that's professionally or whether that's from a family perspective. A lot of homeless people don't have this, don't come from such a fortunate background where they have parents or they have siblings or they have friends. Sometimes people lose families during hardships, and then other times it's just because they fell out of communication because of some of the issues they're going through. Not having a support system and having someone to go to when you're going through troubles or need advice or perhaps a little bit of money, that's just such a driving reason why people sometimes remain on the streets. And then just the last point is really tied to that support system comment is people need to be heard, respected, and given an opportunity to change. We really try to strive to educate not just our residents, but people throughout the community that Even the smallest amount of respect or care, it can really make a significant difference in helping homeless people get off the street and provide them an opportunity to change. John?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. With that little bit of a background, we come to the mission of Joseph's House, what we're all about, what we strive to do. And in that statement, you'll note that it's our work is collaborative. It's important that for us to know that we're part of a community that does have resources, and we strive to bring those resources together under one roof, as Eric said, to have a single point of entry into services. And then we strive to make sure that we're providing those, not just the shelter, but providing those support services that are comprehensive. So you do have a one-stop shop when you come to Joseph's House. So we partner with others, we provide shelter, and we provide all the supports you need to get housing. Eric? So this is what our work is about. That was our mission statement. This is what our work is about. It's about people, first and foremost. It's about people, their lived experience, their hopes, their dreams. And our work is standing with them, sharing meals with them, listening to their stories, encouraging them to reconnect with their dreams, and reinforcing the fact that, yeah, they do have dignity. We will treat them with respect, and we will hold out hope that together, you can move from a shelter, an emergency shelter, such as the one we have at Joseph's House, into a place that you call home. Next slide. So here's what we provide each day and each night. The shelter has a capacity has 92 cots, and so that's 92 combined men and women. As I mentioned, there are professional services all under one roof. Those services, as Eric outlined briefly, medical services, mental health, addiction services, veteran services, help securing birth certificates and IDs so you can access public entitlement benefits. Everything and anything that we've learned over the years are important if you're going to move from homelessness into something that more resembles, independent living and a home of your own. Next slide. So we do this, as I mentioned in the mission statement, collaboratively with our partners. Some of those partners are business members, and there you see a list of businesses around the Camden area and a little beyond the Camden area who help us, employees from these companies, corporate donations, in-kind donations, volunteer opportunities where their people will come to meet members of our staff and our guests of Joseph's House. It's a community effort made by people just like these that you see on the screen. Next slide. We also have other partners, those that help us, stand with us side by side, to provide the social services that are needed. So you'll see the Camden Coalition of Healthcare Providers, Board of Social Services, Veterans Affairs, hospitals, treatment centers, behavioral health centers. We have legal firms that come in and do pro bono work. It takes quite a lot of partnership, good, effective partnership, all under one roof to address the needs of the population that we serve. But fortunately, we're surrounded here in Camden County by a good group of people who understand the issues and who are working with us and one another to meet people where they are, treat them with dignity and respect, connect them with the services they need, and then stay on top of progress, chart the progress, make encouragement, but also when it's needed, hold people accountable and a little bit of tough love when it's needed. But for the most part, it's bringing people to the point where they realize, yeah, they still do have dignity, and there is hope for a brighter tomorrow. Eric? This just gives you a sense of some of the things over the past few years. The first column that you see on the left, individuals served, you'll see, like last year, 588. These are individual men and women who stayed at Joseph's House. If you drop down to the third one, targeted referrals, you see a big spike there. In 2019, almost 3,500 referrals. This is guests who come to us who are connected to those service providers with whom we work to make sure you're getting the help you need, setting achievable goals, and moving towards employment and towards housing. So it's working. We're having a positive impact, and we're doing it with our partners. Next. Yeah, so here's a story of a fellow, a radio story. His name is Ernest. He's the fellow pictured on the left side of your screen there with the Jeff hat on. So this is a graduation picture from when Radio graduated Rutgers with his degree in social work. Radio was one of the first, if not the first, fellow I ever hired to work with us at Joseph's House. He has a long history of struggling with some things in Camden, incarcerated, drugs, etc. But he found himself back in 2010 with an opportunity to get a job, and Joseph's House provided that opportunity. And I've worked with him since for the past 10 years. So now he has finished his GED. He's finished his bachelor's in social work at Rutgers. He's enrolled in a master's program. He's reunited with his family. He's married and he has a place of his own. And Radio says it's never too late to start over. And that's a great slogan that we use at Joseph's House all the time. He's pictured there with some of his classmates, as well as Senator Norcross. Next slide. So here's another guest story, Liz. So Liz has got a bunch of microphones there before her. She was a keynote speaker at an open house that we had in October of 2019. This open house was to highlight a big renovation project that we did at Joseph's House that allowed us to have full-time night space and full-time day space, a hub where people can connect to all those services that they need. So at this particular event, Liz told her story. She was born and raised in Camden. Her mom was a nurse, her dad was a mechanic. She had 3 brothers, sadly all of whom have passed now. He made it through high school, went on to business school, fell in with the wrong crowd. Drugs became a big part of her life, and she wound up homeless. She came to Joseph's House a little over 18 months ago. She is now in her own place. She actually has 2 jobs. One of them is with the Joseph's House. But she attributes all of this to people, to her faith, of course, but for people like those you find at Joseph's House who are ready to listen, who are ready to accept you for who you are, where you are, and hold out that vision of better health and happiness. And we're proud that she has done all of this. And of course, we're happy that she is now working with us at Joseph's House. Next slide. Just a real little brief look at our income. 2019 income was just over $1 million. And you can see that it's a wide variety of sources, right? So individuals, community businesses, foundations, and the government all come together. It's one thing that I've noticed over the years about Joseph's House that I'm so happy about and so proud about, and that is it's really a joint effort, the public sector, the private sector, people of faith, all groups coming together, recognizing that we can do a better job and we can provide for people who need housing. And that's what we do here at Joseph's House. And it just gives you a sense of the support that we get. Next slide. So it's been a challenge for Joseph's House to sustain itself over the years. We're now in our 10th year. But we've been able to do it because we have a committed board, all of whom make personal contributions to the Joseph's House. We have a development committee that comprised of volunteers, people like Eric are on the committee. We have a staff devoted to development. You're hearing them now. That's what I'm doing now at Joseph's House. And we have partnerships throughout with the business community and with the local, state, and city government. So all of this comes together, and this is the way we sustain what we do here. Next slide. So this is an important slide that says maybe next steps, especially if you find yourself as a business involved in a corporation. Maybe corporate support is something you can consider, or maybe it's sharing this information with your employees so they can become aware of what we do at Joseph's House. You have to start somewhere. Many of us, when we began this work, thought we knew about homelessness and, learned a lot by coming in and rubbing shoulders and finding out what really is going on. So it's been a blessing in my personal life to work in this. And I think it's probably been a benefit to Eric as well. And so I'd ask you, Eric, if you don't mind, you're a business guy who has been with us now for 4 years. And maybe you could speak to a little bit about how you support us or why you support Joseph's House.
Sure. And I love the introduction, John, as a business guy. I was introduced to Joseph's House. As I said, I've been volunteering with Joseph's House now 4 years. But I had known about the organization and its mission prior, as a close, actually, childhood friend of mine had been serving on the board. And he'd mentioned it to me a few times, not just within the context of like, Eric, how can you help Joseph's House, or how can you and your agency, your public relations agency, help Joseph's House, but also, I think Joseph's House can help you. He was spot on, and it's something that I've heard John echo many times over the years, not just with me, but with other individuals. I've really just I've learned so much about some of the challenges, of course, that homeless men and women have, but also certainly very much people who just go through very different challenges, and who weren't as fortunate as me, of course, growing up. And when I say fortunate, I mean just having a stable life and a safe place to sleep and food on the table every night. Nothing fancy. And so I have found, since I've gotten involved, of course, as a small business owner in New York, that Joseph's House, as it goes without being said, has become very, very important to me and to my colleagues that work on it. But I've also just seen the involvement from people in my ecosystem who now, because of my affiliation with Joseph's House, my friends, my family, some of my clients, many of my employees, Aaron Haddon, who's not on this call, but deserves as much credit as I do, certainly for any work given to Joseph's House. Everyone has just jumped in and gotten very involved. And whether it's financially, whether it's volunteering, whether it's dropping off, dropping off food or supplies. And so it's really become clear to me that, as a small business owner, and I'm not trying to position myself as a leader or community leader or anything like that, but I do have influence, and I do have a network, and that by working hard and putting my attention to Joseph's House, I'm really able to widen the spotlight on them from my network. And, for that reason, just a lot of people in my life have become very involved. And then they get people that are related, people in their life involved, and the spotlight grows. And that's really the big thing we're trying to do today is just demonstrate that by getting involved from a corporate standpoint, and it doesn't necessarily have to be financially, although of course we do appreciate that, but by getting involved, you share the message, you increase awareness of homelessness in the area. And at the end of the day, you make a difference for men and women that really need the help. And as John referenced earlier, a lot of them are, returning to independent living or just to much better situations than they were previously in. There's so many ways to do this. Visit the website. Of course, I mentioned at the top of the call, www.jhoc.org. We're hosting meetings often at the facility. Right now, we're doing a lot of virtual tours, in the wake of COVID, of course. Sending volunteers, of course, when it gets safer is very helpful. In-kind donations, those can be meals, that can be sunscreen or hats during the summer or jackets during the winter. Financial support, which I mentioned, is critical. At the end of the day, Joseph's House also has bills to pay, of course. Sign up for our email newsletter, and if it resonates with you, forward it to other people. All of these are very, they seem like very small steps, but they're incredible steps for Joseph's House in really really widening our footprint, and a lot of this starts with, speaking with members of our team, and for that reason, I would recommend to anyone who's interested in jumping in from a corporate or individual perspective to email John Klein at jk@jhoc.org. John knows the organization inside out. He's the reason really that I've stayed involved over the years, and he can certainly put you in touch with the right people in the organization so that you and your organization can make a difference.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I often like to talk about the mutual benefit that, getting to know Joseph's House and getting involved with Joseph's House. There are blessings that flow, to the people we serve, but also that come to us and to the community at large. We've seen a difference in our neighborhood. We've seen a difference in the quality of life in our community when people begin to have more hope, when they move off the streets into our shelter, and then from our shelter into good activities that promote their health and eventually move into employment and housing. So, bettering the community, getting personal benefits from this, all part of what comes from being involved in Joseph's House. So I want to thank Eric for pulling all this together, for being with us so passionately and generously for these past several years. And I want to thank all of you for taking this time to learn a little bit about us, and I encourage you to take the next step. Thank you.
Thank you so much.